Climate Week was incredible. I like to say it was like my LinkedIn came to life and was just walking around New York City. I was like, "Oh, hey, it's you. Oh, hey, it's you. I know you." Really, it was awesome because you built all these relationships and all of these sort of like tangential relationships online, over the course of building the company. Or, I was involved in a lot of accelerators that were completely online and never in person. And to see everyone in person coming together. Climate Week was incredible because I mean, you're in a perfect example. You and I had met. We'd been on like several phone calls together, but we'd never met in person. And Climate Week was the convener. It pulled them in for a very specific reason, and it made connections happen that helped advance the initiatives that we need to hit the goals.
Welcome back to the Clean Techies podcast, where we interview the top founders and VCs in climate. In this episode, we actually have a bit of a flashback for you. I sit down to chat with Tiya Gordon, co-founder and CEO of It's Electric, and they're creating curbside EV charging specifically built for cities. Before I even go into what we talk about, I'd like to shout out what Tia's done in the past few months since recording this episode in December, like only December. She was part of the Green Economy Action Plan, a landmark green jobs plan for New York City. She's appeared on NPR, was awarded the 2023 Top 10 Innovator Award for Transportation Electrification by Darcy Partners, was featured in Forbes, spoke at Davos, received a $1.5 million award from the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation, and just last week announced that It's Electric has created the first UL certified detachable cable charger. That's not even mentioning all the recognitions they collected in 2023, but I'll leave you all to read about those on your own. T and I have met a few times in a few different contexts, but this was by far my most favorite. I loved being able to talk to her and just share her story with all of you. In this episode, we talk about the challenges of urban EV charging, how she got her inspiration during the pandemic, cost barriers of installing public charge points, partnerships and pilot programs, scaling urban EV charging solutions with municipalities, the role of government funding in supporting EV infrastructure, her experience as a non-traditional founder in climate tech, and why New York Climate Week was such a great experience for her. As always, thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the episode. All right, Tia, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you this morning?
Doing really well. It's early on a Saturday. Well, not that early, but I'm super fun to be having this conversation. For the audience, Tia and I actually have met a couple of times in a couple of different capacities. And so when I joined the Clean Techies podcast, I think I was super excited to be extended this opportunity. So thank you for making the time. You are very, very well known in New York climate, so I appreciate you taking the time for us.
No, this is so exciting. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, why don't we kick things off by your, quick introduction for the audience. Who are you and what do you do?
Sure. So my name is Tiya Gordon, and I am the co-founder of It's Electric. It's Electric is electric vehicle charging specifically built for cities.
Why don't we start off with what's unique about, electric charging within cities? What is urban EV charging? Like, what does it look like and what's the struggle there?
Yeah. So It's Electric was born in the pandemic. I'm a New Yorker. I've lived here my whole life. And like most New Yorkers, I rely on public transportation to go everywhere I need to go. We've somewhat forgotten of sort of the trauma maybe of the early years of the pandemic in 2020 and 2021 before we had masks, knowledge of masks, vaccines, and it was really unsafe to take public transportation. At that time, given that I had a young daughter at home and other family members that I was responsible for, I had looked at getting a car just to be able to reach family, elderly family, especially in regards to emergencies. And given the fact that I'm an environmentalist, I recycle, I compost. I'm like, well, I should get an electric vehicle. Maybe I can't afford a new one, but maybe I can get a used one. And I had to immediately cross it off the list because in 2020, there was literally no place to charge it where I live in Brooklyn. For me to be able to charge that vehicle, I would have had to have reserved a spot in a paid garage, paid around $500 or $600 a month for parking, and then paid a premium on top of that to get like the one spot that had a charger. And then I'd be paying for charging on top of that. And I was like, well, this is ridiculous. This is clearly pointing to EVs being literally, a plaything for people that are wealthy, and not an actual means of a transition to clean transportation or clean energy for the country. So that's how It's Electric was born. I'll pause there and then I'll kind of do a second way that I can talk about it if that works for you.
Yeah, definitely, please.
Okay, so the other side of it is I look at EV charging in sort of three big buckets right now here in the US. There's home charging, which is how 85% of EV drivers will charge their vehicles. And that space is very well tended, very well cared for. It's saturated, if you will. There's a lot of players fighting to be the players that are going to be the ones to not only be the product that's in your home, but be the ones that can tell you what product you need and how to install it. And it's a very comfortable space. The other side, the other bucket is fast charging. So your destination or highway charging. And that's basically, Tesla and, Electrify America are fighting that out. And then there's what I call the final frontier, which is urban charging, which is what It's Electric is doing. And it's a space that is not very well tended and largely ignored. And that is where we're looking to really make a difference because this is going to be what allows cities to make that transition to clean energy and clean transportation, not only for families or for private individuals who have vehicles, but for rideshare and for fleets. All of these vehicles need to transition to electric. And in some cities, we have very, very, very immediate deadlines. We have deadlines of 2030, we have deadlines of 2035. And so this transition needs to begin now because we cannot make that transition without that infrastructure.
As someone who's very actively involved in the built environment, mapping out the built environment, especially on the venture side, I'm super, super inspired by innovations like this because it's not as clear as a good technology. Like what you're really having to do, and we'll definitely get into this later, is convince a very, very unique set of stakeholders that normally in home charging or, even, more commercial type things, you're not really able to do, or you're not really struggling with that. But in this case, there's a lot more people you have to bring to the table. What does It's Electric do to solve this problem?
So It's Electric is electric vehicle charging specifically built for cities. So right now in New York City, you're in Long Island City, I'm in Brooklyn. We have across the five boroughs, we have 100 charge points that are public charge points that are available on street. There's no barrier. You don't have to pay to use a garage or pay for a private parking lot to access them. And New York City DOT knows that we need more on scale of 10,000. So we need to move from 100 charge points to 10,000 charge points by 2030. That's just here in one city in New York City, right? And those 100 charge points that we already have in the ground, those took about 18 months to install and they cost Con Edison $13 million. dollars. The reason for this is because they connect to the utility. That's how things usually work in sort of the world of energy and transportation is sort of like this very sort of straightforward path of construction and process. So each of those 100 chargers, there's actually only 50 pieces of hardware. They each have a dual head on them. They have to basically connect to the utility main in the street in the road. So, which means that the city has to basically, dig about 7 feet down and then put in a transformer to down convert that power from high voltage to the right level for a level 2 charger. Put in a sub meter, close that all up, and put hardware on top. That right now in this country in the United States at it kind of looks like a gas pump. Everything, all these chargers look like gas pumps. Um, and so this is a time bound barrier, this is a cost bound barrier, and this is what's slowing the ability to put in the infrastructure to facilitate a very fast transition. Because this is what we're in the world of, a very fast transition. I can't say that enough. This isn't something that we have 50 years to do. We have to do this now. We're a year now away from our UN goal of capping greenhouse gas emissions, which is supposed to be 2025. I don't think we're going to hit that. So, and these are supposed to be the goals that basically say that if we don't hit them, we're putting ourselves in a position globally where certain aspects are going to be irreversible for climate, right? So It's Electric is like, well, how do we get as many chargers out there as quickly as we possibly can? And the way that we do that is that we entirely change the way we think about the word infrastructure. The beauty of It's Electric is that building density that creates the barrier for everyone else that says this is expensive, this is going to be difficult because of this density, of the need to close down a street to do this construction. Well, we look at it completely differently because for us, every building is a charger. every building has that capacity. It has that 240-volt power. It has spare capacity on the panel. We just don't have a garage because we live in the city. So what we're doing at It's Electric is we're basically putting a charger on the curb, but instead of that charger being powered from the main utility, we're pulling power from the building that's right next to it. And then to thank that building for letting us help put this charger in the city, we're revenue sharing with them. So every building that has a charger in front of it in a city like New York, in a city like Boston, in a city like DC, San Francisco, Chicago, you name it, they're getting passive income every month just by having this little 8-inch by 8-inch square on their curbside. Basically, a piece of material property that otherwise they're completely unable to monetize.
We are excited to announce that we have launched a Patreon. You can find this newly linked in our Substack and audio platform descriptions. We are both really just so grateful for each and every one of you and wanted to create a way to interact with you and for you to support us on our journey as we continue and try to talk to the best people doing amazing things in climate tech. We do all of this on the time we can muster outside of our day jobs, so any support means the world. Now, gushing over, back to the show. I definitely think that's like a major, major part of the built environment. 'Cause I think one of the things you talked about, and I'd love to get more insight on, is scale, right?
Mhm.
So you may not be able to grow as naturally as you would in, home electrification where it's more spread out. Perhaps it's more of a one-on-one relationship, depending on who you're working with. What is it like convincing cities, municipalities, and how is it like growing in that way?
Yeah, no, I mean, what's remarkable that I'd love to share with you in this conversation is that, I met you, I'd say late summer, right? Is that when we
Yeah,
started
I think
chatting?
so. I think so.
Yeah. So, It's Electric has been what I say is operational for a year. 2023 was our first year of operations. 2022, we were basically like a very sort of nascent early stage company. We were just kind of getting our feet wet. We were getting our wits about us. I wasn't yet, full time. It was very much early days. So 2023 was really basically our first year of like operations of go time. And in the beginning of 2023, we were calling cold calling all of these cities and speaking with their DOTs and speaking with their sustainability point of contacts in their mayor's offices and saying, hey, have you heard of this thing called curbside charging, right? It's the predominant way that EVs are charged in cities in the EU and the UK. We really want to be the ones to bring it here to the United States. We think that this is the solution that we need. What do you think about that? And, the conversations either went one way or the other, where they were interested, but they're like, oh, it's still too early. We don't know. Or they had never heard of it. And it became a really great point of opportunity to educate and have discussions around this, or they're like, no, most of the people who live in like, for example, we spoke with like the city of Las Vegas and they're like, nah, everyone has a garage. We're good. So you have all these different levels of conversation. So that was a year ago. Flash forward 12 months, we are now responding to inbound RFPs that are from some of these very same cities, plus others, that are looking very specifically for not only curbside electric vehicle charging, but for, quote, innovation in curbside charging because of the aforementioned barriers that I mentioned. So when I say that this whole space has to move fast, cities recognize that, they understand that. And I'm sure you're going to ask about this, but obviously, there's the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, there's the NEVI funding. And of that NEVI funding, 5 billion is allocated for basically like DCFC fast charging. But then 2.5 billion is called the CFI, right? Charging and fueling infrastructure. And that's for urban and rural solutions. So there's money that It's Electric doesn't apply for directly. Private companies don't apply for directly, but cities apply for that give them the funding to put in this innovative infrastructure. So now is the time. We are now on the cusp of 2024. Again, we're a year away from our 2025 deadline. We're possibly a year away from a change in political administration. Everyone has to seize the day right now in terms of making the moves that we need to basically prevent any kind of climate catastrophe wherever we can avoid it by starting to put in every possible component that allows us to transition off of fossil fuels.
I think that's some really great insight, and it's something that I've seen myself because anyone who does look into the built environment or urban tech, broadly, starts to realize how important municipalities are in solving this.
Mhm.
Brendan Wallace from Fifth Wall, he's very active on LinkedIn. I love his work. He's constantly posting about how different municipalities are doing things, and I think it's especially relevant here. What did you learn about municipalities as you started to work with them, and what helped you gain the confidence or maybe gain the recognition if it's really, really directed by inbound as time went on?
I mean, we're still in that period of time where we're still having all of these conversations with municipalities, but what we've learned and what we now really try and articulate in our conversations with municipalities and with folks such as yourself that are basically helping amplify our message to those municipalities is that we take what we call a city's first approach. We go to the city, we ask them what are the barriers they're facing, what are the issues they're facing, as opposed to just kind of being like that sort of door to door salesman of the traditional EV charger, which right now we know, I'm sure I don't want to speak about specific competitors in this space, but we know how certain groups are doing. And the reason that a lot of these companies aren't seeing the utilization that they're needing or aren't hitting the numbers that they're needing is that their model is built in a way that is not helpful for how cities work. So, for example, most, if not all, what we'll say curbside charging companies right now in the United States, what they do is they basically do hardware as a service, right? They sell their hardware to cities and they say, okay, here you go. It's going to be $3,000 a unit. And then if you want us to install it, it's going to be this much more. And then you get to own and operate it and keep the revenue. Have fun. And cities don't want to necessarily be in the business of owning and operating EV charging infrastructure. So, it's understanding that, it's understanding what are the biggest problems that they're facing. So when you look at cities where there are a lot more chargers, so we mentioned the number of 100 curbside here in New York City. LA, in contrast, has 4,000, right? And the reason for that is it's a technical reason because um, their accessory feeds, the power that's going to their streetlights and their lampposts is 240. And they're the only city in the country that has that. Everyone else is 120. So they can very easily retrofit a lamppost, for example, and turn that into a charger. So they put all of the flow chargers on a lot of their lampposts. But then we ask them, what are the biggest problems that you see? And they say, well, one of the biggest problems we face is people cutting the cables, right? There's a level 2 charger is going to have that same level of copper in it as a level 3 cable. And, so people that are, opportunistic and are looking to basically sell scrap for metal are cutting these cables. So, I didn't mention earlier that not only are we a behind the meter solution, but we're also the only detachable cable solution in the United States. So, it's basically bring your own cable. And this is, again, the standard in the EU and the UK, but it's brand new here in the United States. So to hear from a city or a municipality to answer your question, like in LA, where they're like, if we could have a detachable cable solution, that would be really appealing. If we could have a detachable cable solution, that would be really appealing to us because it would prevent us. Another city also in California came to us and said, we're having to replace units 3 times a year because people are cutting cables. So again, like, how do you listen to a city, understand the problems that they're having, and then adapt to give them a model that works better for them than them having to just basically sigh and swallow a big pill of an EV charging paradigm that doesn't work well for them.
What kinds of cities are generally more ready for what you have and more ready to get what your technology deployed?
I mean, that's a hard question to answer because every city has its own unique sets of challenges and barriers and priorities. Like cities are complex organisms. And even though I'm incredibly hyper focused on this one thing like curbside charging, which I feel is a game changer and is going to really help cities, the cities have a lot of other things that they have to deal with. So, you need to respect the priorities of different cities. You need to wait in line in a lot of the time and make sure that when they get their EV vision plan up to the top of the list, that you're front of mind for that. Um, But, I think the cities that are prioritizing climate, that are setting high level zero emissions goals for 2050, those are the cities that we have those conversations with first because they have these goals and they know as a city that's located in the United States that transportation is basically the largest sector for greenhouse gas emissions. It's usually within cities, it's transportation and buildings that they have to decarb. And when they just kind of look at those two buckets, then they can start to sort of map solutions to each of those sections.
Hey guys, we need your help with something. In order to better understand what you like most about the show, what you dislike, and how we can help you, please take 7 minutes to fill out our listener survey if you haven't already. It only takes about 7 minutes, but it will drastically improve our ability to give you the best content that you're looking for. Thanks for your help. Now back to the show.
There was a new CTVC report that came out mapping emissions to deal count and deal funding. And I think it's
Mm,
really interesting to see that. Well, one thing they were saying was that transportation is over indexed in terms of the amount of money that's going into it in terms of decarbonizing it versus relative. But I think one thing you see is that that may be true on a grand scale. But if you look at cities, urban areas, buildings and transportation are actually the key emitters.
hmm
And, that compares to, other things like food and land use versus energy and things like that, which are probably more of a suburban or rural context. But I find it really, really encouraging how much activity there is in the space because yeah, I think it's a bigger systematic challenge because there's, like you said, a lot of like legal tape, a lot of things in the way to get there. So that was really encouraging to see.
Yeah.
I do want to backtrack a little bit and sort of put together how this all came to be. So when you first started, how did you, like you said, getting there probably took a lot of convincing, and especially when you're new. So what did your MVP look like, and how did you originally get that to market?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's kind of a story, right? Like, how do you take something that's an idea and make it real and in the world? And so for me and my co-founder, Nathan, that's what we both did in our professional jobs for, almost more than 2 decades for both of us here in New York City. So my background is in what's known as like public facing tech. So if you will, like imagine the time in your life, if you can, before you all had an iPhone in your pocket, right? Which existed. I assure you it happened. Um, and, I was working with private companies that were working to develop literally the first public interfaces that were touch walls, multi touch, any kind of public facing tech that needs to be designed to be used, but also unfortunately abused by the public, but last and work. So I did that for a very long time. And a lot of that work culminated in really major projects. One of the projects I'm proudest of is all of the public facing technology for the 9/11 Memorial and Museum at the World Trade Center here in New York City. So there's technology for the memorial that's above grade and for the museum below. I worked on that project for almost 8 years, literally from concept to execution to installation. And my co-founder, Nathan, he was basically making things happen in a very different space, the space of architecture and construction. How do you put a building in the ground in New York City and get around all of the variables? And one of the things that he always noted when he was working on these large construction projects is that like there's a million challenges that you face, right? There's a million players, there's a million stakeholders. But the one of the biggest challenges you always face was basically getting the power turned on, like getting that utility connection in. And that was sort of like and when we started putting our heads together and we started looking at all of the issues that charging faced, and for me, the first words that came out of my mouth from a design and technology perspective, is where I'll be shorter in my answers for you, is that, and it's exactly what we have on our website. I'm like, oh my God. And I looked at EV chargers in this country that were public. I'm like, why are they so big and bad and ugly? Sorry, everyone. But that that was those were like the first words out of my mouth, and we put it on our website, right?
I think
I'm like,
everyone
there's no
would agree with you.
okay, there's no reason why they have to look like this. There's literally no reason. It's just a failure of imagination and a factor of a lack of design consideration. And then, so that was my side. I took the design side, right? And then Nathan took the sort of the functionality side. Like, how are these chargers being powered? And he's like, well, how can we do this without relying on utility connection? Because if that's the barrier, then let's put our two ideas together and squish them together of better design and better better design and better basically power drive. Like, how do we actually get these things in the ground faster? And that's how the idea started. And then we had this idea, right? But then, like anything else, an idea is great on paper, but you have to test it in the real world. So then we started basically door knocking in New York City. And we were like, hey, DOT, hey, DCAS, hey, EDC, like all of the agencies are quasi-government agencies. We reached out to them and we were like, we have this crazy idea. Who wants to partner with us to test this? And in a city, any city, it's really hard, but in a city like New York, you definitely get a lot of doors closed on your face, right? Where they're like, okay, no, thank you. Random people coming to us to want to, basically dig holes in the ground and run electricity from our buildings will pass. But the New York City Economic Development Corporation believed in us. And they have really incredible teams there that want to find ways to bring in the innovation coming from the private sector and have it be a benefit for the city. So EDC partnered with It's Electric, and we did Pilot One New York City, where we worked with their assets. So they had like an old bank building that was located in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, that really was pretty much underutilized for the last 2 or 3 decades. At one point, it was a COVID testing site. At one point, it was a credit union building, right? And we powered 3 of our MVPs off of this one building, right? Literally, we were able to prove our key value propositions. 1, we could install these in 2 days. 2, we could basically power chargers, level 2 chargers around the clock without there being an impact in terms of the building's power capacity. And 3, we were able to put chargers in areas that were charging deserts immediately without doing any connection or utility coordination with Con Ed. And so that partnership was incredible and incredibly successful to the point where they, after our pilot with them, launched something called the Climate Innovation Pilot Program, which is now an open invitation for other climate tech companies to apply to use EDC assets to test climate technology here in New York City. So if we do nothing else in this world than having started that program, I'm pretty proud of us for doing that.
If we could maybe break that down a little bit, what do you think about It's Electric was the most convincing? It sounds like you listed a couple different things as well as like, the quickness and the ability to go into a charging desert. But specifically within that, what was novel that wasn't really present before?
Solutions are awesome, but solutions that can be deployed with speed and scale are rad, right? Like, if you have that answer, that is not just a one-off, but that is highly repeatable in fast fashion. I think that's what is very interesting to cities, because we all know that, and they also released, really funny enough, they released a report on piloting in New York City. And they were just talking about generally like the biggest danger that cities face in terms of pilots is something called pilot purgatory, right? Where you have this pilot, it's successful, but then it goes nowhere after that. Like, everyone like claps each other on the shoulder and says, good job, we did it. But then what do you do after that? But the fact that we had this ability, that we had a design that was quick, easy, modular, and stylish really caught their attention. You want to basically perform for those that help you. If EDC is going to help us, which they did in ways that we will forever be grateful, because we wouldn't be where we are without their partnership, we want to basically pay it back to them. And how do we do that? We do that then by going out and getting a lot of attention for the work that we do. And we constantly cross promote not only It's Electric, but the confidence and um, the risk taking that EDC took in taking a bet on a climate tech company and how that then pays off for them. So, It's Electric was just named one of the next big things in tech by Fast Company. And, we pay that forward. Like we wouldn't have been able to prove in ourselves without EDC's cooperation. So we share that award with EDC. We share that award with the city because New York City needs to be the city of innovation. New York City is constantly kind of come out front. There's just an article that was in Bloomberg last week. I'm sure you saw it about how is New York City going to be the center of climate tech? How are we going to be basically the Silicon Valley, but for climate?
Yep.
And the reason and the way that it's going to happen is by city agencies working with private entities, working with climate tech startups to collaborate and build solutions together. And that's just like the coolest possible vision.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be able to get to it on this show, but definitely saw a lot of parallels that are advantageous to climate tech within New York. The financing aspect of it, New York likely being a place where you can get more innovative financing together.
Yeah.
Also, just having the scale within urban regions to be able to do something like this. Talking about New York Climate Week. New York Climate Week was a big, big week for you. It seems like I was fortunate enough to go to some of your events. From your personal experience, like what did New York Climate Week do for you?
Climate Week was incredible. I like to say it was like my LinkedIn came to life and was just walking around New York City. I was like, oh, hey, it's you. Oh, hey, it's you. I know you. Really, it was awesome because you built all these relationships and all of these sort of like tangential relationships online, over the course of building the company. Or, I was involved in a lot of accelerators that were completely online and never in person. And to see everyone in person coming together, Climate Week was incredible because you're a perfect example. You and I had met. We had been on like several phone calls together, but we'd never met in person. And Climate Week was the convener. It pulled them in for a very specific reason, and it made connections happen that helped advance the initiatives that we need to hit the goals. And that can be something even as basic as like there's an amazing lunch that was put together by Sophie Purdom of Planeteer Capital, right? Where she basically said, I only want female founders and I only want female funders. And my favorite thing that she did, and it was just kind of funny and kind of awesome and kind of something that I really think about a lot in the world of fundraising. When she started the lunch off, first of all, it was standing room only. They had so much
Wow.
response that, yeah, next time I think she said that we have to like 5x it because of how many people wanted to be
Yeah.
in the room. And she said, okay, founders raise your hand. And then she's like, funders look around, see who the founders are. And then she said, funders raise your hand. And then, founders look around, see who the funders are. And then she goes, funders, lower your hand if you're not deploying capital right now. Right? Because how many times as a founder do you have all these great conversations, which is awesome and wonderful, and you build relationships, but if you're raising, you really just need to
You
have
need
those
to talk to them. Yeah.
conversations with the people that are deploying. And then it really just kind of like helped refocus the pool. And then from there we self-organized, you know what I mean, in terms of ag tech versus mobility versus energy versus fashion, all of these different sectors of clean tech. And we found the right people to talk to in very fast fashion while we had, of course, like brownies. So it was awesome.
Yeah, that's incredible. I definitely think, especially looking back on New York Climate Week, I feel like when we were in the moment, I mean, I personally even, I think I probably had less of exposure than you did, but even for me, looking back, it just wasn't, it was unlike anything else.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I especially, I feel like a lot of the new lab startups, a lot of the New York City based startups got a lot of coverage. So I just wanted to ask your perspective on that because I feel like you were one of the stars. So.
Oh, thank you. No, I, that was an intense week. I need to basically start planning like my next climate week now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not joking. It was incredible. And we also, for what we did, I'll just do a shout out. I had the observation, when we started when climate week was coming up, I was like, okay, this is kind of weird. Like climate week in general is like the world comes to New York City specifically to Midtown, specifically to the Javits Center to talk about climate. Like, it was kind of weird because, as you were maybe alluding to, I don't know, I think all the best climate tech startups are in Brooklyn. So I went to the group that organizes Climate Week officially, and I basically shared this observation with them. And I was like, and yeah, and I get it. Everyone's coming in globally. People don't want to schlep out to Brooklyn. So what if we bring Brooklyn to Climate Week? And so they loved the idea. So we put together a program called Brooklyn Block Party, which was basically this big party that was right when you got out of day one programming at the Javits. As soon as those doors opened, we had drinks. We had this incredible DJ that one of the other startups, Stack Mobility, they had a connection to DJ Large Professor, who's this old school Queens DJ. And it was Stack Mobility, it was It's Electric, it was Dollar Ride, it was Green Portfolio, it was Street Life Ventures, and I'm sure I'm forgetting others as well. Oh, and Clip, one of my favorite startups from Brooklyn as well. We all basically just got together. We put out an invitation. We had 600 people RSVP. We had about 350 people show up. And again, just putting the right people in the right room. And also, I want to shout out the fact that it was a great opportunity for young students, either undergrad or grad, that want to work in this space. They RSVP'd, they came to the party. We talked to everyone because this is the kind of infrastructure, this is the kind of ecosystem that we need to build. We need to build the startups of today. We need to make sure that they are meeting the people that are going to fund them to scale. And we need to meet the talent that's going to then help these startups grow over the next 5 to 10 years. And those are people that are in school right now that are trying to understand, how do they work in clean tech? And honestly, like programs like, or not even programs, but happenings like Climate Week is what can bring all of those players together, from the top, like very big name VCs, to people that are in their sophomore years of undergrad and that are trying to figure out, how do they work in clean tech? And that's what Climate Week was. And I cannot wait for Climate Week this year. It's going to be incredible.
I'm going to piggyback off of that a little bit in terms of talent. How did you go about building out your core team, and what qualities do you look for?
Yeah. So what's really interesting there is that we're still building. We're a team of 5 right now, 2 founders, 3 full-time employees. Um, and my background is not only in design, but it's in operations. So I ran operations for sort of very large, fancy design companies here in New York City. And part of my job that I always did as an operator was team building and staffing and recruiting and trying to find the best talent out there. And normally, what I did in my previous life of hiring for high end architecture firms or hiring for high end UX firms, like, because I've worked across the spectrum and across every discipline of design in my career here in New York City, was that I would write these really specific job descriptions, and I would like funnel and funnel and funnel until I found like my star. And then I would court them and bring them in, and it would be a love fest, and they would rock it, and we would build amazing things together. But for It's Electric, we needed people that not only were stars, but that had a very particular passion for what we were doing. Because it's so funny, like there's so many RFPs that come out that are like, and you need 15 years experience in this space. You know what I mean? But guess what? This space is like a year old. I mean, so you're not going to find that. So we wrote our JDs to more attract the person. And then we wrote a job for that person once we found them. So we wrote a very loose job description that pulled in a lot of different people from anywhere from policy to government. And then we were like, okay, here's like the 5 top stars in this group. We're going to write a job description specifically for them. And that's how we found, Shannon, who basically leads all of our policy and all of our development work on a federal level, a state level, a city level, corporate level. That's how we found Judy. She was a veteran from New York City Department of Transportation. She was their director of special projects. Like, what better person could you have for It's Electric than someone that was basically understanding a very unique project and a very unique solution and finding solutions within the challenges of a city agency and bringing them in. And so that's how we build our team, is we basically find the people that have the vision, and then we build the job description for them. That's going to change, of course, as we scale and just need lots of project managers, lots of engineers, marketing. Then we're going to get a little bit more traditional. But for this core team that we're building out over the next year, and we will be hiring in 2024, we're going to continue to work in that same methodology where we just basically attract the best possible talent, and then we make a job that's their dream job for them.
Amazing. I know we're running up on time, so I want to make sure I run out the major points. But especially related to fundraising and therefore like how you went to market from your pre-seed to your seed. In one of your previous profiles, you mentioned you and Nathan coming from a non-traditional background. I think I want to touch on that a little bit because it is very clear and it's really cool to see how, this design and production background and then, architecture background has been able to do all of this climate and energy. So what about your non-traditional background do you think has affected your experience? What did you have to overcome?
I did not know anything about the world of venture capital when I started It's Electric. I started It's Electric with Nathan, and we really, in the beginning, treated it like this project that we could work on while we lived our regular lives and had our regular jobs, right? We were very both, we were both incredibly concerned about the climate crisis, and we wanted to do something, but we wanted to do something that was really going to move the needle. So, we started It's Electric, like I said, as an idea that was a project, very much from like a design methodology that we worked on nights and weekends, which is very much, a typical startup story, right? Um, but then you kind of get into the world of having to fund it. And you understand very quickly that while you may have built this giant network of design, brand, engineering, um, anything that's sort of coming from the worlds that we worked in, I didn't know a single investor, literally. Like there was no one in my Rolodex that was an investor, a VC, who worked in any kind of space of sort of complex finance. And when you don't have that network, you're really starting from square one. Like you are just like not only having to learn about venture, but learning about what is the relationship. Like, how do you even find these people? How do you get these meetings? How do you get warm introductions as opposed to just cold calling or applying online? And also, before you win accolades, now we have this incredible list of accolades that we can pull people in and we can attract them to us because we can say, hey, in our first year, we've won these number of awards and we've been recognized by these governments and we've been, like I have this incredible list that I can put in a cold email to someone. But when you're starting, you don't have that. So the biggest challenges that you face as an outsider, no matter how accomplished you are as that outsider, is not being that insider. And by that I mean, you know, we don't neither of us come from an Ivy League background. Neither of us come from a finance or VC background. And that slows your funding because you have to build all those relationships as opposed to, frankly, people who are, founders or, serial founders who, when they're ready to start their next company, they know exactly who they're going to call and they know exactly how they're going to get that first check in. And so, that was the steepest hill that we had to climb. But what I really like to say, and that I say with the deepest conviction possible, is that as you go through fundraising and you get rejection, and then you get more rejection after that, you can't be disheartened because those rejections were not the right investors for you. We ended up for our pre-seed round, where we ended up raising a great round. We found investors that are our champions. They're not just checks. They fully believe in us. They advocate for us. They cheerlead for us. And I wouldn't want to have it any other way. We had seen some big checks walk away and we had said goodbye strategically also to some big checks because of the strings that were attached to them that made us hesitate or pause. And even though it's hard to do that, especially when you're raising in challenging times, I don't regret those choices because we now have investors that we work so hard for. And in exchange, they know that they made the right choice in investing in It's Electric. And I'm incredibly proud of those relationships. It's one of the things I like to say, the investment community that we've built is one of the best things I've ever done in my professional career.
That's incredible. I feel like, you know, your relationship between founder and investor can be a source of stress, but for it to be a source of triumph, I think that just bodes well for the future. So,
Yeah.
I want to come up on the last question of the recording. I wish I could continue this for hours, but this has been really great. What are the top three pieces of advice you give to, you know, aspiring entrepreneurs, really early stage founders about how to get their journey going?
I've got some battle scars, right? The hardest thing you have to do, which I'm still learning, is that you have to really believe in yourself no matter how many people tell you no. So you have to have that conviction. And we all know that companies that are co-founded by a mixed gender team that have a female founder, they receive less than 2% of all venture capital, right? It's staggering as a statistic. So we know that stat, but then put that into actual application in real life. So if you're a male founder, you're basically getting yeses at X percentage higher than women. So as a female founder, you're basically getting a door closed in your face at an 80 to 20 ratio, let's say, over male founders. And how do you maintain your confidence when you're getting that many rejections? You know, and you think about that statistically, we know also that co-founded companies with a woman who's a co-founder go through 3 times longer a period of diligence than just companies that are founded by men. So the scrutiny is real. And so my advice is that you have to understand that you have that solution and that the challenges that you're facing, my advice to people that are going out there are to have conviction and to have that conviction proven through the product and the relationships that you've built. It is one thing for an investor to say no because they don't necessarily like the idea or like the space, but if they like you and you have proven your idea works and you've proven your unit economics and you have proven your key value propositions, you basically need to give them zero reason to say no. Then you know that it's something that's completely beyond your control, of which there's many things, right? LPs have different metrics, have different requirements for their VCs. VCs have limited amounts of checks that they can deploy each year. They have follow on. They have all of these different things that they have to balance. So you have to know that you've done everything on your side possible. And if they say no, that it's not on you, right? Like you've proven every possible point that they're concerned about. And then, as I like to say, and this is definitely something I want to underscore, is to anyone out there that's starting or in the middle of a fundraising journey, just understand that if you get a no, like a fast no is the biggest possible gift because it's like they're just not into you. Move on and find the people that are into you because they are going to be out there. And don't try and convince people that are like on the fence. Don't do it. It's a waste of your time. People that get it, like when I have those first calls where people just like literally like hit their hand on the desk and say, holy shit, this is crazy. How come no one's done this? Like those are the people that I want. Those are the people that I want to get on my cap table. They get it right away. If I have to go and explain this entire world and walk them through the nuances and challenges, it's going to be an uphill battle. You want those people that just like their eyes light up and they exist and they're out there. And whatever space you're in, you're going to find them. But you just have to do the numbers to find those people in the incredibly like deep sea that is venture.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, look, I really appreciate this so much. It's been a long time coming. Like you said, I've been had a chance to meet you both in a traditional VC capacity and now more of a climate sort of specific built environment capacity. So if anything, my appreciation for what you guys are doing and your work has just grown over time. As we sign off, where can the audience find you, and is there anything you want from them?
Sure thing. So obviously, it's electric.us is our website. If you are a driver or a property owner that would like to have electric vehicle charger in front of your building, if you're a driver, that means that you get to charge. If you're a property owner, and even if you don't have a vehicle, you're earning passive income every month, we have a wait list to sign up on. So please go there. If you want to track us and see what we're up to, we're most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. So you can follow us there. And we are raising our seed round. So if anyone's out there and they want to talk to us, I'm sure that Samil can put you in touch.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was a pleasure.